Hello, hello. Hope you guys are doing well. Making sure that audio is working. I assume it is. All right. Set my drink over here. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Raven's Reading, to Raven's Roost, as I like to call it. Here, I read to you guys my stories. If you're brand new to this series, welcome. I stream these every Monday night if I can. And in these videos, I simply just read to you books or stories that I have written myself. I am a published author, and reading and writing is something that I absolutely love to do. I love it more than gaming. I love it more than media. It's creating stories and characters is my passion, and it is something that I adore. Unfortunately, it will never be my most popular thing, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to make my peace with that. But the fact that you're here means the world to me. It really, really makes me happy. All 13 of you. Thank you so much for being here. So, to reiterate the rules so that we all know, here I'm going to be reading The Night Angel, which is a story that I've been reading for about 3 streams now. If you want to catch up on The Night Angel, if you've missed any of the chapters, go back and check out the rest of the streams. They've all been labeled, chapters 1 through 10, chapters 11 through 20, all the way down the list. You should be able to catch up pretty quickly, and then you can watch this stream. This will probably be the last Night Angel stream. I think we're going to conclude our reading of The Night Angel tonight. We're going to go through chapters 31, I think, through 38 or 39. Tonight, and then that will be the end of it. Unfortunately, Night Angel did not get finished. It ended abruptly because, well, I'll tell you when we get there. But we will read as far as we possibly can go tonight. So I'm very, very excited to get started. Now, a couple things that I do want to say real quick. The rules for these reading streams are simple. Number one, I don't mind you talking in chat. In fact, I welcome it. I'm glad that you're here to be in chat. I don't mind that. But we will not talk about games. We will not talk about For Honor. We won't talk about response videos. We won't talk about anything of that nature. I'm not going to answer it. And if it gets persistent, I will simply just block it. I'll put you in a timeout because we're not here to talk about that stuff. We are here to read. We're here to enjoy stories, and I want to get into that storytelling space. I need to get into my sort of zen zone, as it were. Number two, please be respectful to me and to everyone around you. Please don't go into silly trolling comments or anything like that. And definitely don't mock my voice acting skills. I'm not a trained voice actor, and I'm not good at doing female or childish voices, so please bear with me. I try to do my voice in specific ways, but I'm not that good at it. In the past, I've had people pick on me for this. Please don't. It doesn't help me. It doesn't give me any confidence, so please just don't do that. So that's pretty much it tonight. Like I said, we're reading Night Angel. Really excited to get into it, so let's not waste any time and pick up where we left off on The Night Angel, chapter 31, which was written January 14th, 2018. Okay? All right. Without further ado, let's get started. Chapter 31. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it before, I cried. I was back at the house now. Everyone was gathered in the dirty, smelly den, and the Honjo Masamune was in my hand. As I recalled all that I'd done with it, I went into every detail, never once stopping. I had to remind myself a few times to breathe as I spoke. Connor never took his eyes off the sword, and Joshua never took his eyes off of me. His sides and chest were wrapped and patched up heavily from his wounds. Kirai was there as well, sipping on a soda can and smiling. She seemed happy that I was happy, which made me even more happy myself. And the thing, it just started burning away. Like it was on fire? Connor asked. Yeah, almost exactly. And then it just died? Yes! And you said it yourself, Joshua, that an ancient vampire like that was immune to just about all conventional forms of repelling them. So that proves the sword is legit. It worked, guys. It did more than that, Joshua whispered, smiling from ear to ear. The sword is holy. Sure sounds like it, Connor hissed. Yeah, you said that over the phone. What does that mean exactly? I asked curiously. Well, the Honjo Masamune was originally a flawless sword and was able to cut anything its wielder desired, even evil. But holy swords don't just cut through evil, they can purify it. Holy swords are the only swords that are said to kill dragons, demons, poltergeists. But since there are so few in existence, usually new and complex methods are needed to kill them. So how many other holy swords are there? I asked. Well, there's Excalibur. That's the most famous. Then there's the Sword of Charlemagne, Durendal, La Tizona, but that might have been one. I don't know for sure. The point is, Joshua interrupted, that this is one of them now. A sword that not only cuts through a wicked entity, but burns them as well, purifies evil. This is a holy relic. It's not the Honjo Masamune anymore. We might need to rename it. Well, what should we call it? Not sure, but we don't really have time for that now, do we? Connor stood up. We might have a weapon that can kill Set. But do you really think that'll be that simple? He wants to revive Echidna, and we don't know where he's going to do it. Well, over Echidna's grave, probably, Joshua argued. Oh, and you know where that is? Connor growled. Joshua started to respond, but shut his mouth again, flushed. Exactly. No one knows where the remains of Echidna are hidden. All four of us sat in silence a moment, only hearing the soft sipping of soda from Kirai's can. Well, we know the area, anyway, Joshua replied darkly. They'd be in the Mediterranean area. Echidna's a Greek monster and probably died somewhere in that vicinity. But where in Greece or the Mediterranean? We don't have time to search the whole damn area, Connor argued. Guess we should get plane tickets and start looking, I offered. It'd take too long. It'd be easier to ask for help. But who could we ask for help on this matter? I asked. Connor's eyes suddenly widened. His gaze fell on Joshua, who looked back at him. He stared for a moment, and then he too looked a bit surprised and even worried. No, Joshua. It's the only way. Not a chance in hell, he shouted back forcefully. I'm not involving her. Not her. Who else can help us find out what's going on? Connor said. You're not afraid of her, are you? You're damn right I'm scared of her. And you are too. I'm not a night angel. And I want to live, Joshua hissed. Wait, who are we talking about? I asked. Connor and Joshua both fell silent, and finally Connor leaned over the couch and sighed. Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt. Wait. Hold on. You know the Greek goddess Artemis, I gasped. Joshua knows most of the known gods and goddesses of legend. Connor smirked. I wish I didn't know her sometimes, Joshua muttered. Oh yeah, I know that Artemis hates men, right? I can't blame you for being nervous around her. Oh yeah, she hates men all right, Connor agreed. But that's not why Joshua's afraid of her. Then why are you so afraid of her? I asked. That's not important, Joshua snapped back. What is important is that she can't be trusted to help us. She can't be trusted to help you, Connor corrected, but our little swordswoman here might have a better chance. Artemis is more friendly to women, and the fact that she's a werewolf might be enough to sway her. Why would Artemis help people like us? I asked. Well, she's the goddess of the hunt, and she makes her home in the wilds, Connor replied. She'd be aware of the natural order of the area, and she'd know if it were disturbed or thrown out of balance, and could tell us where it's taking place. If she can know all that, why wouldn't she take care of it herself? I wondered. That's simply not how demons work, Joshua explained. They tend to stay out of the way of each other's affairs as often as possible so that there isn't conflict between them. That's why they often have humans and demigods do what they want instead, acting as vassals. And I hate to admit it, but yeah, Artemis might know what's happening. Well, call her here then, just like you did before. Artemis isn't called that way, Joshua answered. No, she isn't called at all, frankly. In order to talk to her, we need to go to the Lagoon of Nymphs. That's where her servants, the nymphs of the wild, bathe and play. And if Artemis isn't there, her nymphs will know where she is. If you're really afraid of her, maybe you should wait here and we'll go. No, the nymphs will run if they see you. But if they see me, they'll recognize me, and they might stay long enough to hear us out, if they don't try to kill me first. Okay, time out. What on earth does Artemis have against you? I breathed. I'll tell you the story another time. For now, we need to make arrangements to go to the forest outside of Athens. I'm sure those forests don't exist anymore, I argued. Don't underestimate what deities are capable of. I guarantee the lagoon is still there, and Artemis right along with it, Joshua explained. Okay, then we'd better get some plane tickets, Connor said. I can contact some friends of mine who could arrange the whole thing. Connor walked off to go and make some calls. Why not ask Ashaka for help again? She could teleport us there. I'd really rather not do that. I don't like taking advantage of her generosity, even when the world is at stake. Rebecca, daemons and deities aren't creatures to be trifled with, even in dire circumstances. I don't want to start racking up debt with them, especially not when the goddess in question is a goddess of wealth and fortune. He started to stand up, but suddenly groaned in pain and sat back down. Kirai jumped up, setting aside her soda and helping him sit. Joshua, you're still hurt, she squeaked. I'm fine, kid. But it is true. Are you sure you can make this trip to Greece? I asked. I have to. The nymphs won't recognize you, and if Artemis chooses to, she'll turn you into an animal. She's done it to other fools in the past who trespass in her woods. I gulped a bit. The thought of being turned into an animal didn't appeal to me. But I also could tell that Joshua wouldn't bring us to the doorstep of Artemis if he wasn't sure we needed her help. I sat next to him and helped lay him down again to recover, thinking over all that we'd learned and what we were preparing to do. So, any ideas for names for that sword? I don't speak Japanese. How about just Holy Sword? That's lame. Joshua laughed painfully. Back to the drawing board, then. All right, guys. I got some good news, and I got some bad news. Connor shouted, walking back into the room. I pulled a few strings, and I called in a few favors, but we got a plane that'll get us to Athens. Fantastic. I didn't know you had those kind of connections. I laughed. Don't underestimate the friends in low places. Connor makes in his treasure hunting and Tomb Raider. Joshua smirked. Oh, shut up. If it wasn't for these friends in low places you're talking about, you'd be stuck here begging for help with the Shaka, wouldn't you? All right. So what's the bad news then? It's not a cargo plane again, is it? No, it's actually a pretty nice plane. A private jet, Connor sighed. Now it was Joshua who looked surprised as he sat up in amazement. A private jet. Who did you call, Connor? That's the bad news, he sighed. Samuel Ruger is the one arranging everything. I'd sooner ask Loki for a lift, Joshua roared, nearly jumping out of his seat. Kira had to hold him in place as Rebecca looked between the two confused. Oh, I've heard of Samuel Ruger. He's an anthropologist and works at the Smithsonian, right? I've seen articles about him in the paper before, and even my dad mentioned him on occasion. What's wrong with him? I asked. Do you want to tell her, or should I? Connor asked. Joshua shook his head and glared at the wall furiously. Connor groaned and rubbed the back of his head. Where do I start? How about with what you and Joshua have against him? Well, Samuel and I used to be partners. I never worked for the Smithsonian or anything, but sometimes I'd help him get hold of some artifacts and relics that were donatable. But then, during one job we did together, I decided to trust Samuel with the knowledge that monsters and gods and such creatures were real. I introduced him to Joshua, and, well, yeah, he took it well at first, until dollar signs started shining in his eyes, Joshua sneered. Look, calm down, Joshua. I'll explain, okay? Look, during a job 3 years ago to hunt for a rogue sphinx in Egypt, he took the opportunity to rob an ancient burial ground and started up a slight zombie outbreak, Connor sighed. We were stuck in that sand pit for 2 weeks. He took the artifact back to the States with him, so there was no way to put them back to sleep. We had to put down 500 corpses, Joshua bellowed. That snake can't be trusted. He probably smells money at the end of this job, and he wants it. No need to shout. We all have ears, Connor sighed, rubbing his head. And yeah, I get it. I know he's a dick, but I didn't have much choice. He's the only one I could fully explain the situation to, and he believed me. Joshua's anger suddenly turned to horror, and he spun to glare at Connor. Connor, you did it. You did it, tell him about the Masamune. Please tell me you were not so stupid that you told him about the sword. I'm afraid, Joshua, that when we kill Set, he'll want it as payment for his services, Connor groaned. Joshua spat on the ground and turned away. I never said we'd give it to him. Did he say he wants it or not? No! But I'm sure that it's what he's hoping for, Connor groaned. Now settle down, both of you, I cried, stepping between the sofa that Joshua was on and where Connor was standing. Look, if what you said is true, I agree. We can't give this guy the sword, but he didn't directly ask for it, did we? Well, no, he didn't, Connor admitted. Then until he asks for it, let's just accept his charity. When he states his price, we'll start to haggle, I argued. Rebecca, you don't know this scum. He'll stab you in the back if it makes him a few bucks, Joshua snarled. Well, maybe so, but I think I have a plan on how to deal with him, I smiled. And how's that? Connor asked. Well, if it's really the sword he's after, then he'll try to tail us all the way through Greece, I pointed out. He'll want to keep it in his sights, right? Yeah. And his greed will lead him right to where we're going. Yes, Joshua asked. Well, who are we going to see? I offered. Slowly the lights began to click on for Joshua and Connor. Oh, this is gonna be good, Connor grinned. I love the way you think, Rebecca. How soon can we leave, Connor? 3 days, Connor replied. I'm now. So excited to see Artemis if it means that skunk will be with us when we do. Chapter 32. It didn't take me long to understand why Joshua hated Samuel Ruger. The man was a jerk. Upon meeting him at the airport, he didn't stop looking at me like I was some kind of rare animal. And perhaps it's exactly how he saw me. He also glanced occasionally at the bags we carried, wondering which one the sword might be in. I barely said a word to him. I wanted to stay as out of touch with this man as possible. Connor tried to be friendly during the plane ride, striking up conversation where he could. Joshua, on the other hand, only glared in his direction, snarling when he spoke and his tongue dripping with as much sarcasm as spit. As the jet neared Greece, I had looked at Joshua curiously. During the ride, I thought the only expression he was capable of was anger at Samuel, but now I could see there was something else going on. His eyes kept going down to his feet, and even Kirai's attempts to involve him in a game were met with limited success. Joshua was nervous. I could practically smell it on him. He didn't want to be here, and he certainly didn't want to see Artemis. I couldn't help but wonder what he'd done to Artemis to piss her off so much, but I also knew asking wouldn't be enough to get him to answer. I just have to wait for the right moment.
So, where are we touching down? Samuel asked. The pilot needs a spot to land the plane, you see, and given the discreet nature of this venture, I don't suppose you'd be willing to land at a normal airstrip?
Well, Joshua, Connor asked. We're going to Parnitha, he answered. I thought we were going to Athens, I pointed out. Joshua shook his head. Parnitha's a forested mountain range north of Athens, and it's where we'll find what we're looking for.
Ah, and just what is it we're looking for? Samuel Ruger asked, walking over and sitting in front of us, eagerness painted on his face.
I glared at him for a moment and then answered, careful with my words. We're looking for a goddess.
Oh, how exciting! What kind of goddess exactly?
The kind that doesn't take kindly to money-grubbing assholes, Joshua snapped.
Now don't be like that, Joshua, Samuel tutted. Remember, this whole trip is being paid for by me. I'd be a bit nicer if I were you.
Sorry, I'll rephrase. She's the kind that doesn't take kindly to slight money-grubbing assholes. Is that better? Settle down, Joshua, Connor grumbled. We're just here to find Artemis. She's a Greek goddess. She should be able to help us solve our situation. After being told their destination, Samuel climbed to his feet, beaming from ear to ear.
All right, I'll talk to the pilot and get him to let us down as close to Parnitha as possible.
As he walked away, Joshua sneered and looked down again. Kirai frowned and patted his arm comfortingly. That snake hears the word goddess and his brain starts thinking how he can turn that into a payday, Joshua hissed. He is pretty, unsavory, I admitted. It won't matter. Joshua, do you know how to find the nymphs who will take us to Artemis? Connor asked. Once we get to the Parnitha woods, I'll make a small offering to the forest. Then the forest will reveal the springs to us, he explained. And when we find the spring? I asked. The nymphs that frolic there will see us and panic. Odds are that they'll try to hide in the forest. So I'll go in first, because a few might remember me. They might even listen. I'll then ask to speak to Artemis, and if we're lucky, they'll call her and she'll come out to talk to us. And if we're not lucky? Well, that depends on Artemis, he answered. If she's feeling merciful, she'll just knock us out and drop us off outside of her woods. But if she's really pissed, we might all be calling those woods home for the rest of our lives. We're taking a really big risk, aren't we? I asked. Thanks, Connor. Thank Connor for this. It was his bright idea to go making deals with a goddess he knows has issues with me. Look, I'm not too keen on getting turned into a bunny or anything, I pointed out. Actually, she might just lend her ear to you, Connor acknowledged. You're female, and Artemis is a noted man-hater. As the only female amongst us, she may want to hear your case more than ours. Let's just pray she woke up on the right side of the bed today. The hike through the forest proved a challenge in and of itself. The trees were thick, the terrain merciless, and the sounds of animals watching us was always there, reminding us that we weren't in the city. Imagine how it must have felt, Connor whispered in awe. The early Greeks wandering outside of their cities and into the forests, into the wilds, realizing just how small they were compared to the gods, compared to nature. And even now, those echoes of mysticism and fear can be felt today.
Connor, you make quite the poet, Samuel chuckled from behind us.
We all glanced back at him. He was the only one not dressed for this hike. Joshua and I had on hiking boots, jeans, and zipped-up jackets. I had a bag over my shoulder holding both the Masamune, my gun, and an assortment of snacks. Joshua had his gun ready too, but his was in his hand. He wore a baseball cap on his head and shades over his eyes. Connor was dressed in a sweater and cargo shorts, and he was carrying a cooler of what I wasn't sure. Kirai was in a hoodie to protect her from the sun, but Samuel was wearing the same clothes he'd been on in the plane. A polo shirt, khakis, and a sun hat on his head. He looked like a man on a boat, not a hiker.
"So, how long until we find Artemis?"
he asked. Connor stopped to the ground and looked up to Joshua. Joshua didn't answer but kept walking until, finally, the pathway we'd walked ended, bringing us to the face of a large rock that seemed specifically placed to block passage. He sighed and held out his gun.
"If you have any weapons or dangerous objects, place them on the ground now."
I did so. I took off my bag and set it down as Joshua laid down his gun.
"Don't worry, they'll be returned when we're through. Now, I'm going to make an offering, and hopefully it's accepted. If it is, then we'll find the pool of nymphs. Connor?"
Connor stepped forward and opened the cooler, revealing a pig's head.
"What is this, a gift for the Lord of the Flies now?" Samuel asked.
"No, but flesh and blood must be paid. Sacrifices are frowned upon in these times, but some daemons will expect some form of offering, and this is the best we can do. Besides, if you think we entered this forest unnoticed, you're fooling yourself. We're at the mercy of the wilds now, and unless you want me to offer you up as the sacrifice, you'll keep quiet and show some respect," Joshua snarled. He laid the pig's head down and bowed.
"Everyone bow!"
I did, turning my eyes to the ground beneath me, feeling a bit silly but still doing as ordered.
"Oh my God!"
Connor gasped. I looked up, and to my shock, the rock face had melted away to reveal a final passage, and I could see and hear water on the other side.
"The spring of nymphs,"
Connor gasped. He started to move forward, but Joshua stopped him with a look. "I'm going in first. Follow behind me and stay close," he ordered. "From here on, there's no telling what Artemis will do." Joshua walked slowly and cautiously into the pathway towards the water. I stayed behind him, Kirai behind me, Connor next to her, and Samuel bringing up the rear. The spring was gorgeous, like something out of a dream. A small waterfall rolled into it, and the mist from its fall coated the grass and air with a dew that glistened. The trees around the pool acted like a natural border, and the rocks that made up the edges were all like seats for those wanting to bathe in it. And when I saw the nymphs, beautiful fairy-like creatures, all female, all with beautiful skin and gorgeous complexions. They had long and gossamer hair, pointed ears, and they seemed to be adorned in nature, though appearing naked at the same time. They were breathtaking.
"This place is unbelievable," Samuel gasped. "Are those nymphs?" he cried. "Shut up," Joshua hissed.
It was too late, though. The nymphs saw us and gasped in fright. 3 vanished in the blink of an eye, and the final one stared for a moment before diving into the spring, vanishing without even leaving ripples. It was as if they had never been there at all.
"No!" Samuel shouted. "Don't run away! Come back! I promise I told you to shut it!" Joshua snapped. "One more word out of you and I'll tape your lips shut."
Samuel gave a solemn nod, but still looked itching to cry out something profane. Joshua stepped closer to the pool and knelt down.
"Artemis! Goddess of the hunt, we humbly request an audience with you. Please, servants to the goddess, please speak on our behalf so we may see her beauty and she may hear our pleas."
His voice echoed over the waters and in the air, but nothing happened. With each passing second, I felt my excitement waned. It seemed as if it was all for nothing. All of it had failed. No goddess, no help. "Joshua, I don't think she—"
"You arrogant, two-faced mongrel!"
She stepped out of seemingly thin air, a gorgeous woman with long black hair, wild and untamed, her eyes a sinister blue that bore into the very soul. Her clothes were that of the forest, made of leaf and timber, and upon her back was a bow and a quiver of arrows, as well as a spear in her hand. On her hair she wore a crown of lilies and roses, and her dirty feet were bare. She glared at Joshua with an intense loathing.
"Artemis!" Connor hissed to me. "That's Artemis!"
"I can see that," I hissed back. Joshua stood up again and tried to smile. "Artemis, it's—"
"Don't speak!"
she barked. She was infinitely different from Ashaka or Hachiman. She was like a wild dog or a creature of the world rather than a divine entity. She could have been a wolf in disguise for all I knew.
"You will listen."
"Sure," he sighed.
"The last time I saw you, Joshua, you were in this very spot. You had the body of a dead boar at your feet. My boar. Well, to be fair, I didn't know—" "Silence!" she roared. "You betrayed my trust. You, who I had granted a boon to live in my forest so long as you didn't kill my animals, you honeyed words, your kind gestures were all just a facade. Joshua said nothing to her. She continued to shout. You lied to me, and you lied about who you were and what you wanted. I told you to get out of my woods and to never return to it. And here you are, and you throw yourself at my mercy. Do you honestly expect me to show you any? Do you? She screamed. Can I speak? Joshua asked. Connor winced, almost expecting her to smite him where he stood, but she didn't. Do so at your own peril, night angel. I told you that I didn't kill that boar, and I swore to you that it was an honest misunderstanding. Besides, if you'll permit me, you and I both know that's not why you kicked me out of your forest. Oh, you impertinent little shit! I could make a list of the reasons I cast you out. Oh, is it a list of things I did or things I wouldn't do for you? Joshua asked, a bit more venom in his voice. Did you really just say that to me? To me, she gasped. Face it, Artemis, you never liked it when things didn't go your way. You impetuous... excuse me. The conversation stopped and everyone turned to see Samuel stepping out. I hate to cut this short, but I think that we can all see it's going nowhere. Miss Artemis, the world is at stake and time is of the essence. I think it would be most... He paused a moment and clutched his throat as if he were choking on something. Who are you? She demanded. What kind of man are you that interrupts a goddess? I'm Samuel Ruger, he croaked out. Before he could say another word in his defense, there was a blinding flash of light, and when it cleared, where Samuel had once been, a large bullfrog now sat, croaking in confusion and hopping towards the pond. No, you're just a slimy little croaker who dared speak in my presence. No disagreements from me, Joshua shrugged. I felt a bit shocked by his cold-hearted attitude, but I was even more stunned by how nonchalantly he took the whole thing. Artemis then turned her attention back to Joshua, ignoring the bullfrog. Where were we? You called me impetuous, Joshua reminded her. She fumed, turning red in the face, and held out her hand. Give me one good reason. One good reason I shouldn't turn you into an earthworm and let you wriggle in the mud. Joshua looked up at her with the softest gaze I'd ever seen him give anything, even Kirai. He sighed and let out a long exhale. Because if you really thought I was as bad as you claim, I think you would have already doomed me after you kicked me out those years ago. If you really hated me, Artemis, I don't think we'd be talking. Let's face it, you and I were never good at this sort of thing. This thing we have it's hard. It's complicated, but isn't that why we tried to make it work in the first place? Don't you try sweet-talking me, Joshua. I won't fall for it this time, she snapped, though the blush on her face was saying otherwise. If you really give a damn, why come back now when the world is in danger? Why stay gone so long? Babe, he whispered, I didn't stay away because I wanted to. I stayed away because, I didn't know what words I could give you to win you back. And now? I don't have words. But will you settle for my heart? I quietly gagged along with Connor, unable to believe that the hardened Joshua would possibly say something so corny. But to my amazement, Artemis started blushing deeper. Oh, you don't look at me like that. Damn it all, you're the worst. I hate you so much. I hate you. Why can't I just destroy you? She then pointed to the other side of the pond. Go, stand over there. I'll deal with you later. Right now, I imagine your little apprentice wants to talk to me. Me? I squeaked, suddenly remembering that I was part of this negotiation. Joshua turned and smiled at me before walking off to stand in the corner like a good dog. Artemis then marched towards me and crossed her arms. A pleasure to meet you, Rebecca Anderson, child of the moon. You know who I am? I do, she smiled. Believe it or not, I knew your mother as well.
Chapter 33.
You knew my mom? I cried, disbelieving. Artemis nodded. A very long time ago, yes. Please, tell me about her. Tell me about how you knew her, I begged. That's a very long story, and I'm not sure we have the time for it, Artemis explained. At this, I was very put off. I crossed my arms, raising my eyebrow accusingly. Time wasn't an issue for Hachiman, I pointed out. Artemis wrinkled her nose at the name. Oh, playing with other gods? I do wonder who introduced you to him. Her gaze turned towards Joshua, who smiled sheepishly. Rebecca, let's deal with the more pressing matters before we talk family issues.
Come, walk with me. She turned and waved her arm at the wall of brambles and bushes as they parted way for her to walk into the forest. Are we okay to wait here? Joshua asked. You are. See if you can fish your croaking friend out of the pond, and if you do, I'll change him back before you go. Possibly. She shrugged and walked out with me into the forest. The air was peaceful and filled with bird songs. I felt at ease and relaxed standing with Artemis. She waved behind her as I followed her out, and the pathway closed. We were both alone. Not even a hint of the lagoon we'd seen remained. Now, let us speak, she whispered. Artemis, I have to know about my mom. Later, Rebecca. Later, she urged. Our time is brief. Let us first discuss the more pressing matter. You're after Set. Right, yes we are. We think he plans to revive Echidna, I explained. No need to think on that, my dear. That's exactly what he's doing, Artemis growled. My informants tell me he's preparing a resurrection ritual on a hidden island about 5 miles off of Ithaca, in the realm of Phlegrarian Islands. This is where Echidna was laid to rest. Will he start a new age of monsters? I asked. That would be the most obvious reason for resurrecting her. But I believe there's more to it than that. I believe he wants to mate with her. Seriously? Echidna mated with the monster Typhon and gave birth to some of the most horrid creatures to roam our nightmares. But Typhon, as powerful as he was still just a common monster, if I recall. Imagine if a god mated with her. The offspring would be... Well, I'd rather not think about it. Would it be that bad? I mean, they could be stopped, right? Perhaps, but where to even start? The last time a god mated with another monster was when Loki mated with the giant. They gave us Hel, guardian of Helheim, Jormungandr the world serpent, and Fenrir the wolf. I hardly even want to think about what would happen if the mother of monsters mated with Set. Right, let's avoid that outcome, please. We can't let him revive Echidna. He has to be stopped. So will you help us? I asked. Sadly, I cannot get directly involved, Artemis sighed. I notice every god I talk to says that. And with good reason. The pantheons are forbidden to interfere with each other. Imagine what would happen if a pantheon caused the death of a god from a different pantheon. The war that followed would be... As much as I hate it, and as much as I truly want to help you, I can't do it. That's why gods have always chosen mortals and demigods to do their work, because it's just easier than risking personal involvement. Fine, I get it. Maybe I can beat Set on my own. I have the Honjo Masamune. You revived it. Purified it with the Holy Grail, I answered. Artemis beamed at this, but then her smile faded, as if a shadow of a memory were creeping up on her. And yet I'm worried it still won't be enough. The sword blessed by God will definitely kill Set. But Set isn't going to be so easily struck down. He's taken measures to protect himself. He's gathered scores of vampires and zombies to him, and other monsters of the world, offering their blood to revive their mother. But I fear it gets far worse than that. Do I even want to know? Set has not only rallied monsters, but he's stolen from the pantheons. Stolen? We're not sure how. But Set somehow infiltrated the Aesir realm of Asgard and stole many of the Aesir weapons and tools. He what? Of all the pantheons, the Asgardians are the ones who most likely would take revenge for this treachery, but they are powerless. Set has kidnapped Idun, the Norse goddess of immortality, along with her golden apples. When the Aesir grow old, they eat of the apples and regain their youth. Without her, they are becoming weaker and weaker by the day. They cannot fight Set as they are now, but Set, on the other hand, has their weapons and their armor. He has stolen from the Egyptian pantheon, the Greeks, and others. That's terrible, Artemis. You can't sit by and do nothing. I have no choice, she repeated, spitting furiously. Zeus holds contempt for the Asgardians and forbids our interference in their business. Honestly, he's probably having a good laugh seeing Odin as a feeble old man. Granted, I'm not too upset about it either. Under different circumstances, I'd find it humorous. Well, screw what Zeus says. Do what's right, for heaven's sake. One of the negative aspects of being part of a pantheon of pagan deities is that you're answerable to the pantheon. Step out of line and the weight of that action will come down on you. I really can't afford to make Olympus mad right now, but maybe. She sighed and looked around as if hoping no one was listening. Maybe there is a way I can help, even if just a little. Come with me, she instructed. Artemis began marching deeper into the woods swiftly, moving with grace compared to a breeze through a valley. As she walked, she kept glancing back as if expecting to be followed. Is something wrong?
Though we cannot get involved, the various pantheons are still very active right now, watching Greece and waiting to see what Set does. I am constantly watching to ensure that we are not being observed by prying eyes. I don't want Hera or Zeus knowing that I helped you, she whispered. After walking far enough into the darker parts of the woods, she stopped and breathed a sigh of relief. All right, I'm going to give you a boon. This is not for you to keep. You will return it to me after Set is defeated. Do so, and I shall reward you. What are you I stopped speaking almost instantly as I saw what Artemis pulled out of the forest. As if reaching into the shadows of the trees, and dried hands extended to her, a marvelous wooden piece of wonder. Etched with runes and symbols lost to my eyes, but clear to hers, Artemis held out to me the most gorgeous recurve bow I'd ever seen. It seemed to shine with a lacquer finish and horsehair string that whistled. It was longer than my torso and was thicker as my lower arm. I couldn't imagine the power that this bow must have. I am to understand that you are an archer, so I will lend you my bow. Your bow? I stammered, feeling my quivering hands softly touch the bow of legend. This bow is unique and blessed by my power. It can only be used by a woman. Any man who attempted to wield it would find they could not handle the draw strength and would be unable to even pull it back. In your hand, though, the string will pull back with relative ease. When an arrow is shot from this bow under the light of the moon, it will burn through wood, stone, and flesh. This bow will slay anything that is mortal, but be warned, Set is not a mere mortal. He is a pagan deity. The bow will not kill him, but perhaps you can find another use for it, Artemis explained. As she spoke, I took the bow in my hand, feeling my knees going weak. Thank you, I cried. Artemis, I can't thank you enough for this gift. I'll want it back, of course, but I also don't want you going into this fight without the proper assistance. We looked at each other, both smiling, both respecting, and both in awe of each other. I, standing before a goddess long known for her wild beauty and power, was being bequeathed a weapon known as a legendary tool of the gods, and she, a being who knew nothing short of godly authority and turning her gaze down upon mortals and humans, was now acknowledging me like I was someone worth admiring. I felt both honored and afraid at the same time. We should return. I fear what your friends may do with my lagoon, Artemis sighed, turning to return to the path. The one I turned into a frog. He struck me as a very foolish man. He's an asshole, yeah. Should I leave him as a frog? No, we should turn him back. I wouldn't be able to live with myself knowing I condemned someone to that. Well, you have a good heart, Rebecca Anderson. Better than most of the gods of Greece. I appreciate that. Artemis stepped on the entrance to her lagoon and glanced back at me. Times are changing, Rebecca. The world isn't what it was in our golden age. If Set succeeds, new horrors will be unleashed upon this world, horrors that even we will not be fully prepared to confront. Do not fail, Rebecca. Whatever it takes, do not fail to defeat Set. There you two are, Connor cried as he saw Artemis and I walking back into the lagoon. Kirai caught the bash and is waiting on you to turn him back. I still don't know if we really should turn him back, Joshua laughed. But either way, did you... Wait. Rebecca, where did you... he asked, seeing the bow strapped to my back. I gave her my bow for the purposes of this mission, and she will return it to me, Artemis clarified. She then turned her attention to Joshua and placed her hands on her hips. And as for you, Joshua, will you return to me? Ask me again when this is over, Joshua smiled, winking. Oh, you pull what you did before, and I'll make sure every forest you go to has an angry dryad trying to kill you. Believe me, it won't be like last time. Artemis smiled at his answer and snapped her fingers as the bushes and walls began to vanish around them. My servants will lead you out of the forest. When you're out, your frog friend will return to normal. I urge you not to return for at least a week. Your presence here will undoubtedly be found out by Hermes, and if he has told Zeus, I'm sure he'll be here soon himself. Damn it. Fine, let's hurry. Kirai, Joshua shouted. The small vampire girl ran from the pond carrying a bullfrog in her hands. She smiled and gave a polite bow to Artemis before turning to leave. Connor was already hurrying out, more than happy to put distance between himself and the goddess. Joshua stayed with her a moment longer, gazing at her before taking Kirai by the shoulder and leading her out. Artemis sighed and shook her head. Her eyes fell on me and nodded. You're just as tenacious as your mother. Yes, Artemis, you said you'd tell me about when your mother was bitten by a werewolf. She wished to find a cure, so she came to me. Why you?
I'm the goddess of the hunt and the wild. Werewolves, despite not being my creation, do relate to the wild nature of humanity. She believed I would have a solution. I did not have a cure. As you know, there is none that exists. But you did do something for her, right? Rebecca, we need to... 1 second! I did help her, Artemis nodded. In my presence, my power tamed the wolf side of her. She was safe with me. She was docile. So every full moon she would find me, call my name, and I would bring her here, where she would go through her change in peace. She would then leave the next morning. During those nights we grew close. She was a very good friend, and we shared much. But what happened? I asked. She met your father, Artemis answered, and she fell in love, and she insisted she wanted to be with him. I warned her it would be harder to manage the wolf when away from this lagoon, but love has no boundaries. So I gave her a potion to take on full moons, which would help her maintain some control of herself. But the night she died, I believe she forgot to take it for some reason. Why? Why didn't my dad tell me? If he knew all this, I don't think he knew about your mother's connection to me. Otherwise, he might have moved you and your mother here so she could have easier access to my lagoon. Though he was a man, your father wasn't an unintelligent sort. I nodded at this and hugged myself, feeling both satisfied with her answer and also lost. Artemis knew my mom. Mom came to her for help. What else did Mom know about this world of the arcane and magical? What was Mom like? Rebecca, we don't have time. Screw you, Joshua. I just want to know. He's right, Rebecca. Now isn't the time. The harvest moon is in 2 days, and when it comes, Echidna will be revived. She pat my arm and shook her head towards the exit. Go, and return to me with my bow when all is done, and then I'll tell you anything you want to know. Just, please, one more question. If Mom knew you, then she knew other creatures and deities, right? Who else knew Mom? Who else could I talk to about her? Please, I want to know all I can. Artemis frowned and crossed her arms as if annoyed. Your mother did know of one other god, but not of Greek origin. Who? Who was it? I pleaded. Artemis snorted in disapproval but sighed. Not like he'd be one for much talking with you, but... Yes, who? Who? I nearly grabbed her, but before I could, she vanished in a fury of leaves and wind. He is not a god, he's a giant. His name is Mimir, the uncle of Odin, and the keeper of the Well of Wisdom. I don't know if he'll help you, but your mother did seek his counsel. The Night Angel, Chapter 34. All of us were on a boat riding out in the dead of night. The Mediterranean air was thick with what some might have called mist or fog, but I sensed something else in it. There was a cold dread that hung in the air. The night sky seemed so strange, and the moon was barely rising over the ocean beyond. Its color was haunting. A reddish-orange hue of a harvest moon was visible, reflecting off the clouds like an omen of danger, which to us on this dingy little boat, it most certainly was. Kirai was deathly quiet and even trembling, huddling close to Joshua fearfully as the small motor of the boat pushed them ever closer to the distant island beyond Ishikya. Riding near the front was Connor, who was keeping lookout. I was manning the motor and sitting across from Joshua, looking more than a little rattled. Samuel was there too. He still didn't seem over having been turned into a bullfrog earlier. Connor had promised nothing like that would happen as long as he kept his mouth shut for the rest of the trip, and he was taking that advice to heart. Rebecca, when we get to the island, we'll need to get a sense of the situation before we do anything, Joshua explained. Reviving Echidna is not an easy feat and requires a lot of blood and participation from her children, so we can assume the island is flooded with monsters. What kind can we expect? Vampires, gorgons, and likely a few chimera of certain varieties. Connor nodded at this. But if we're lucky, they'll be caught up in the ritual and won't know we're there. No. I'm sure Seth is already perfectly aware that we're coming and will be ready to receive us. Let's circle around the back of the island and come up on the south side. Think we'll slip under the radar that way? Samuel asked nervously. It seemed the weight of their mission was finally starting to set in for him. No, but it won't be quite as obvious, Joshua answered. What should I do? Samuel asked. You're going to stay on the boat with Kirai, Connor growled. That way you won't get in any trouble. Sounds very reasonable, Samuel nodded. Oh, and don't think of trying to steal the boat and get away, Connor grinned. Kirai's a vampire and could easily be your throat out and suck your blood.
Samuel turned pale at this realization and glanced at the small child across from him as she smiled mischievously. Joshua didn't smile. His eyes were fixed on the island. What horrible things waited there. "You nervous?" he asked me. I nodded. "You should be. Because damn it, I know I am." When we made landfall, Connor helped pull the boat onto the shore, and I jumped out with Joshua. Joshua grabbed his bag of gear, and I grabbed mine. I took the holy sword I now carried and strapped it to my hip. I laced my bow over my back along with a quiver of silver arrows. I felt the weight of a pistol on my thigh, and I looked to see what Joshua was arming himself with. To my surprise, he only carried a single small shotgun, a knife on his hip, and a pistol on his ankle. He wasn't wearing a great deal of ammo or armor, but his eyes flashed with a murderous intent. "You got the sword?" he asked. "I've got it." "Then let's hope that Hachiman's training paid off. If we live through this, I'll thank him personally. Connor, you should wait by the boat too." "No. There's something else about this place. I feel something. And I need to see it." "Well, let's stay close then. And if I say run, you take off. Let's roll." We pushed forward, forced to scale a few rocks to get deeper into the island. The moss and grime of the rocks made climbing difficult, but the full moon pushed me onward. I felt its familiar power that seemed to lay upon me. I tried to suppress it. I couldn't afford to go wild just yet. Then the subtle noise of something caught my ear. Some kind of singing. "Hey, you hear that?" Connor asked. "Yeah, that's the ritual. Come on," Joshua growled. Laying low, he walked low along the rocks and glanced over the perch of the cliffside. I followed carefully, trying hard not to make a sound or draw attention to any movements. I finally caught a glimpse of what lay below in the middle of the island, and it was nightmarish. I saw a legion of monsters. Vampires, zombies, werewolves in chains, chimera, and countless other creatures, all standing around a great marking on the ground drawn in blood. I watched the vampire step forward, stand near the center of the circle, and then lay down on it as he thrust a dagger into his chest, bleeding himself. The blood flowed from his body and joined the bloody symbol on the ground, making it glow all the brighter. And waiting, watching the barbarism from the sidelines, with a smile on his face, was the foul beast himself. I remembered his face. I remembered it so long ago outside of a burning house. "There he is," Joshua snarled. "How do we even get to him?" "It's a menagerie of monsters," Connor hissed. "Wait. Set's saying something," I whispered, seeing him walking around the circle and kneeling over it. His red hair seemed to shine scarlet as he held out his hand over the marking. "Amica mea tu viva super eterum," he called out. "My love, you shall live again," Joshua translated. "Love? But Set is an Egyptian deity. How can Echidna be his love?" "Well, in some stories, Set is an incarnation of the Greek monster Typhon," Connor gulped. "And Typhon was the monster who mated with Echidna to create some of the world's most terrible monsters. It said Zeus defeated him, but some stories say he fled south and settled in Egypt, becoming Set." "Are you serious?" Joshua snarled. "So Set is Typhon?" "It's just a theory," Connor muttered. "Keep in mind that the deities of mythology aren't true gods, just highly powerful entities of ancient origin. It's highly probable that this god Set was always just an incredibly powerful monster named Typhon." "It doesn't change anything, does it?" I asked. "He dies either way." "Right, good point. Let's get a little closer and see if we can—" "Wait!" Connor gasped. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" I asked. Connor hurried down the slope and ran east, away from the circle. "Connor, wait!" Joshua shouted, chasing after him with the right behind. "Don't run off!" Connor didn't run far, though. He froze in place and ducked down fast as Joshua grabbed his shoulder furiously. "You can't just go running off when you feel like..." "Connor, what the hell is that?" I looked around the two and saw what they could see. Beyond them was a large and well-guarded pavilion of items and animals. A troop of zombies and vampires moved aimlessly around them, clearly guarding them. Chained up to a wall was a great gray horse with fiery eyes, neighing and bellowing in anger. Tied to a rock were a set of spears that were shaped like thunderbolts, and they looked like they were pulsing with electricity. Locked up in a cage not far was a young and beautiful woman with a basket by her side, crying in fear, and next to her was an older woman with strange-colored skin and large fairy wings. And this was only the beginning of the strange objects that could be seen. A large hammer rested on a stone to the far right of the encampment, and there was even a glass case that was holding a single disembodied eyeball. "The lightning bolts of Zeus, the horse of Odin Sleipnir, the hammer of Thor, Titania, queen of the fairies, Idun, the Norse maiden of immortality. Is that the Eye of Ra?" Connor breathed. "The most famous and legendary items and figures all brought here. Why? Ow! Connor cried. Sacrifices, Joshua growled. They're gifts to his soon-to-be reborn bride. No wonder the Norse gods haven't taken vengeance for all this. With Idun kidnapped, without her apples of immortality, the eyes are weak. We need to free them, I whispered. Are you insane? Connor cried. That'll let Set know exactly where we are. But we can't just leave things here. We'll get them later when we were thrown to the ground by a tremendous bellow that came from the ritual site. Connor covered his head in fear, and Joshua pulled his gun, sweat dripping down his face. I grabbed the sword, prepared to pull it out for battle. Did they do it? Wait here, I'll check. Joshua hurried back to the vantage point to see. I watched him go and then turned to Connor. You should head back to the boat. We can take it from here. No, I can't. All of those artifacts and creatures, they're priceless. It's a goldmine of history and knowledge. I can't leave it there. You aren't a night angel, I countered. Before I could say more, Joshua slid down to meet us, looking furious. Echidna's being revived. We don't have time to wait anymore. Listen, I'll draw the monster's attention to me. Meanwhile, you go after Set and finish him, Joshua snapped. Connor, stay here and out of sight. Okay, let's go. I'm ready, I nodded, running after Joshua towards the ritual. Up ahead, I could see strange smoke billowing from the center of the marked circle. It was thick with malice and an evil presence. The blood was flowing to a single point and starting to grow larger like a mass of some sort. Set was beaming from ear to ear as it grew. Joshua didn't waste any more time and finally made his move. You son of a bitch! Joshua roared, firing his shotgun at a nearby vampire and blowing its head off. The other monsters took notice at last and made a move towards him. He vanished in a flurry of movement, evading and dancing through their ranks, slaughtering any who got too close. He was sluggish, though, still worn down from his injuries before. I couldn't focus on him, though. I had something more pressing to deal with. Set had his eyes focused on Joshua and was making a few steps towards his vicious struggle. I saw my chance and took it. Drawing the sword fast, I charged it and ready to impale him on the holy steel. The moon fueled my charge, and I moved with the silence and lethality of an owl. Did you really think I didn't know you were there? Set asked, glancing back at me with a grin. He knew I was coming, but I didn't stop. I had to finish the thrust. Set sidestepped the thrust and grabbed my wrist, squeezing tight and smirking. I snarled him and yanked free of him. And you're still lugging around the Masamune. A useless relic like this is nothing but dead weight, Night Angel. I readied the sword all the same and sneered. Set didn't know the sword had been restored. He had no idea. I could use that. All I needed was a vital blow. Well, if it's so useless, then why not stand there and take it, I bellowed. And give you the satisfaction of hitting me, he laughed. Not a very fun game, then, is it? His fangs flashed like fire. A game? You think this is a game? I ran and swung at him, only for him to vanish like a mist and reappear behind me. Of course it is, girl, he grinned. That's all this ever was. All life ever is. It's a game of cards. You're given a hand to play and you keep them close to your chest. Then you play what you've been given. You roll the dice, you make your bets, and you win or you lose. So come, little angel, let's play a little longer. I raised my sword in a defensive posture. The sight made Set smirk. Oh, someone took some classes, did she? My guess would be Hachiman. Who else would that fool Reigns call to help you? He laughed. He took another dangerous step closer, and I swiftly took a step back. He was taunting me, daring me to fight him. What do I do? Suddenly there was a loud shriek, and the ground began to rumble as the blood mass was starting to shift and gain a form. It was looking more solid, fleshy. No, I gasped. My beloved is close to life once more, Set hissed. He then sighed and slumped his shoulders, his smirk never fading. This is so disgustingly droll. How about we make this more fun? He raised his fingers and whistled loudly. Suddenly, from behind the island's north side rose a golden light. It ran like the wind, and with a shining, brilliant glow, it was a brilliant chariot approaching, pulled by brilliant horses with eyes and manes of fire. Do you like it? Something I borrowed from the god Helios. What haven't you stolen from the other deities? I screamed at him. Set jumped onto the air and landed on the chariot. My beloved Echidna will be quite hungry when she awakes. She'll need some tasty human flesh to feed on. So I'm off to the mainland to gather some for her now. Of course, you could chase after me to try to stop me, but then Echidna will be revived for sure, and a new breed of monsters will be born whether I live or die. You could try and stay and finish her off and prevent her revival. But who knows how much havoc I could reap before the night is through. I've always wanted to play a few more rounds in Europe.
You monster! I cried, realizing the twisted game he had in store. With a laugh, the fiery horses neighed as he took their reins.
Isn't this fun now? The odds in this game are very against you, Night Angel. Whatever choice you make will have untold consequences. Or will you surprise me and find a way to succeed against all odds? Please, keep entertaining me. Show me a good time, Anderson. What will you do, Night Angel? It's your play!
And with that loud, horrid, bark-like laughter, he tore across the night, riding a glowing chariot towards the sea. All right, give me a second to get a drink, and then we'll move on. All right. Chapter 35. Damn it! I screamed. I sheathed the sword and tried to run after the now vanishing deity, making his way into the night on the chariot. I struggled through the strange ritual grounds as monsters began thrashing, screaming, and gnashing their teeth. Die! I ducked just in time as a vampire threw himself at me. As he landed, he turned fast to attack, but I was already ready and anticipating him. With a sudden pull of the sword, I cleaved the vampire through the midsection. He dropped in 2 pieces, and it's nothing more than a lump of blood and guts, burning away from the holy sword. Other zombies and monsters began leaving their stations to attack, only for them to meet with similar fates as I worked my way through the mob to get to Joshua. Though try as I might, I couldn't see him among all the fighting and shouting. "Joshua!" I cried. "Joshua! Rebecca!" Joshua shouted back as he fired a shotgun shell into the face of a nearby zombie, and he rushed to my side, reloading as the vampires and beasts were regrouping. "Where's Set?" "He's getting away. He's heading to the mainland to sacrifice thousands of civilians for Echidna's revival." "Damn it! He's playing with us, the goddamn son of a bitch!" Joshua turned and fired off a round at another vampire, who managed to dodge out of the way before his arm was ripped off his body. Joshua then reached into his belt satchel and pulled out a small circular bomb. "Cover your eyes!" he bellowed. He threw the ball down, creating a massive explosion. I instinctively covered my face, but it felt like weird powder was floating all around me, floating down onto my very skin. The bomb had detonated to release that strange mist. As I tried to clean my eyes, I heard growls of pain and agony. Opening my eyes, I looked to see all zombies, vampires, and werewolves nearby were gasping, screaming, and clawing at their skin as the powder seemed to be burning them. "What?" "Moon dust, filled with finely powdered silver. It's not enough to kill, but it'll hurt like hell," Joshua explained. He grabbed my arm and yanked me away from the dust cloud, which was still torturing the attackers. With some space to breathe, Joshua began reloading his shotgun. "There are too many of these bastards here. We have to stop Echidna's revival. She's starting to come back," I cried as I pointed to the corpse of Echidna, which was now moving and beginning to look more complete. As she thrashed and writhed on the ground, various monsters began dropping dead, deteriorating, offering up their bodies and blood to their mother. The mother of monsters was returning piece by bloody piece. "But we can't let Set go either. You have the sword. You have to go after him. I'll stay here and stop the ritual." "How can I catch up? He's riding the chariot of Helios." "He's what?" "Son of a bitch," Joshua spat. I don't know, goddammit all. "Joshua!" Joshua spun to see a sight that made his jaw drop. I turned as well, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My eyes seemed to pop out of my head. Behind us, Connor was running, but there was another figure next to him. A great gray horse was trotting beside him. His eyes burned like fire, and his very mane seemed to flow like the flames of war. His body radiated with a glowing essence of majesty. Though it was likely an illusion, it almost looked like when the horse moved, its legs seemed to multiply from 4 to 8. "Connor, what the hell is this?" Joshua cried. "A minute ago, a few of the cages holding the mythical animals burst open and a few fiery horses escaped running off. I figured Set called them, so I used that chance and freed this one. Meet Sleipnir." "Sleipnir?" I asked. "The horse of Odin, king of the Aesir," Connor explained. "That's it. Rebecca, use Sleipnir to go after Set." "Will that thing even let me on its back?" I demanded as I got closer. The horse didn't move, but it kept its eyes trained on the horizon, in the direction Set was flying.
Set stole artifacts and tokens from the Aesir. I'm willing to bet that Sleipnir wants payback. He's a very emotional creature for a horse, Connor muttered. I think he'll let you on. But can he even catch up to the chariot of Helios? I mean, he... Ah! Joshua suddenly grabbed me around the middle and lifted me up onto Sleipnir's back. The horse gave a snort, but didn't resist as I placed my hands on its neck and held on tight. Don't underestimate this horse. Not just any horse is worthy to carry Odin. Sleipnir, I've never done this before. Go easy on me, okay, big guy? The horse just snorted again and began neighing loudly. Joshua turned distracted as the moon dust bomb's effects were dying and the beasts were starting to regain their fury. Get going. We'll handle this. Make sure that bastard dies, Joshua instructed. Don't you die either, I pleaded. Go, Joshua snouted. I nodded fast and looked at the horse. All right, boy, let's go. Sleipnir let out a roar that sounded almost inhumane, and then he broke into a raging sprint. Set rode over the rocky islands of the Mediterranean, smirking to himself as he went. There was no possible way that Rebecca and Joshua could stop the ritual. Even if they did, he'd have over 1,000 souls to offer up to start all over again, though his heart kept wandering back to Rebecca's eyes, and he grinned. That fire there was so encouraging. He hoped to see her again, to hear her defiant voice once more. Set! Set spun around to see a figure tearing across the earth towards him. A gray horse with 8 powerful legs was ripping apart dirt and earth with each gallop. Astride its back was Rebecca Anderson, a bow in her hand that was not made by the hands of men. Her eyes were filled with a feral fury, and her face was a contortion of might and devotion. Set felt his smile grow into a bellow of laughter. Wonderful, Rebecca! Absolutely wonderful! He cried to her. Now this is what I was hoping for. Riding the horse of Odin, wielding a bow of the Greek pantheon and with the eyes of a beast. This is what is a battle of the gods. So come, Night Angel, let's make this a worthy battle. I'd never ridden on a horse before, but I was sure they couldn't run this fast normally. Sleipnir was as fast as a gale-force wind. His body was like lightning itself. I could barely cling to his mane as he tore across the earth. I felt every vibration and twist he made. His breath puffed from his muzzle like a train engine as he bellowed. Set was further away, but we were closing the distance fast. I could occasionally try to raise Artemis's bow to fire a shot, but would constantly be thrown by a sudden lurch from Sleipnir. Set turned his attention to the chariot and yanked on the reins, turning the fiery horses to the right. As he turned, I looked out to my horror to see the sea open up. Set simply snapped his fingers, and the horses began to fly into the air, over the water, and evading the ground altogether. How will you answer this riddle, Night Angel? Set called back. I looked at Sleipnir fearfully. Even if I wanted to stop him, I had no way of doing so. Sleipnir, you got a way to fix this? I begged. Sleipnir just snorted in response, charging towards the water with full speed. I simply clung for dear life, praying that I wasn't about to die because of a horse ride. Sleipnir let out another bellow before suddenly striking the water and charging straight across it. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! I screamed as Sleipnir literally began running across the top of the water. Mist flew from behind him with each powerful gallop. You can run on water? Set out only laughed in reply. Just as I thought. Very interesting, Rebecca. Your steed is impressive. But are you? I glared back at him and drew the bow again. I would knock that stupid smirk off his face with a well-placed arrow. I fired, and with a beautiful twang, it flew straight for Set's face. Set raised his hand and caught the arrow with almost no effort. Artemis gave you that bow, didn't she? I felt it looked familiar. Sorry to say, but an arrow can't kill me. He then tossed the arrow aside and raised his arms. As his chariot turned along the ravines and rock spires around the islands, he let out a shout of power, and the rocks began to crumble to nothing, falling down in an avalanche around myself and Sleipnir. Let's see you get out of this one. Sleipnir, I cried. The horse roared and suddenly leapt up, landing on the fallen rocks and then bounding between them in midair. It was as if he were weightless. I was speechless, almost forgetting to hold on as Sleipnir darted from one falling boulder to the next with grace and elegance so outstanding, I wondered if I wasn't in a dream. I gripped his sides with my legs and drew another arrow to fire as he bounded through the debris. I can't hit him directly, but maybe I can ground him. Sleipnir, I need you to jump. Get me as high as you can. Sleipnir simply snorted and shook his mane in response. He landed on the next rock and then rocketed into the air with tremendous force. We flew almost to the clouds, and I looked up to see what I wanted to. The bright and glorious light of the full autumn moon. I felt that familiar rush fly through my body. My blood came alive in the basking, and my eyes flashed.
A new sensation overtook me, and I felt myself gritting my teeth as I laced another arrow into the string. I looked down at the chariot nearing an island to land. I pulled back the arrow carefully and allowed the wind, the sky, the moisture, and the very smell of the earth to direct my aim. I was not a monster. I was more than human. I felt a predatory instinct purge me onward. I end it with this. I aimed true, and the bow seemed to glow as I fired the arrow. The arrow flew true. Set turned around just in time to see it. He held up his hand to guard his face, but the arrow never met it. Instead, the arrow struck the rear end of one of the horses on the chariot. The flaming horse of Helios let out a scream of pain, crashing into the other horse, and both cascaded to the side, sliding into the island and falling, sending Set flying and crashing to the ground like a lump of coal, bouncing across the ground. Sleipnir landed only a few feet away from the fallen chariot. I jumped off his back, and the clouds parted above us, revealing the moon to myself and to Set, coughing and bleeding from his shoulder as he stood again. His red eyes fell upon me and saw mine, my light blue wolfen eyes.
Well done, Night Angel. Well done. You're quite the warrior after all, aren't you?
By now, Joshua's already done putting your beloved to bed, I barked, my confidence rising bit by bit with each minute under the moon. I stroked Sleipnir's side and I smiled. I know how excited you are to join her, so why don't I send you to hell with her?
Don't get excited, dear, Set chuckled.
He raised his hand, and suddenly I felt my rush fading. I spun to see the light of the moon fading just as fast. The clouds were covering it. I couldn't feel its power on me anymore.
This game isn't quite over yet. We have a few more hands left to play.
It doesn't matter, I shouted, drawing my bow once more to fire at him. Snap! I gasped as something suddenly struck the bow from my hand and sent it flying to the ground. Sleipnir let out a cry of shock, and I jumped backwards to see what had done it. I saw a long shaft in the ground, and attached to it was an ornate and razor-sharp spearhead. What is that? I gasped.
The spear that never misses its mark, and never fails to slay that which it strikes, Set laughed. It's the reason Sleipnir was so desperate to stop me. It's the weapon of his master, Gungnir, the spear of the All-Father.
He held out his hand, and the spear flew back to his hand in an instant. As he held it, he turned its spear tip towards me and pulled back his arm.
So what will you do now, Night Angel? Can you still find the strength to stand against the gods?
I felt a fear grip me at his words. That spear could kill me in one shot. No, it would kill me in one shot. I was going to die. He was going to kill me. All this work, all we'd done for nothing, all that fighting and trials and sweat just to be slaughtered by an all-powerful spear. As I took a step back, I felt the weight of something on my hip. The weight of my sword. I touched it softly and ran my finger along its handle, remembering the sword I'd gained, the training Hachiman had given me, and the words of prayer that Joshua had breathed as he baptized this blade in water from the Grail. You're no god, I whispered, drawing the sword. You're just a daemon with OP weapons you stole from others.
True enough. But what exactly are you, then? He asked with a grin.
I grinned back, raising the sword to a battle-ready position. He would throw that spear, and I would not hesitate to retaliate. It all came down to a single instant, a moment of hesitation and a moment of decision. I'm an angel. Chapter 36. I had distinct memories of swordsmanship training with Hachiman. He would run me through drills and routines with the katana again and again. He'd shout in my ear and then strike my sides with his staff when I screwed a form up or forgot to breathe properly. He was strict, harsh, sometimes even cruel, but I thanked him for his lessons now as I rushed Set quickly. As he thrust forward with the spear, I pirouetted around and made a low upward slice towards his hip. He stepped back, easily evading, and then turned the spear around to graze my side. I reacted swiftly and swung around to face away from him, but didn't give myself an opening. His spear did a full swing, and my sword blocked the strike. The sound of ringing metal filled the night as I grunted and rolled away from Set, my hands trembling from the impact. Set just grinned that same malicious smirk that he always wore, and it was beginning to frighten me even more.
Excellent form, Rebecca. You've clearly had some training. Hachiman, yes? What form of bribery did he use to get that old fox to bend to your whim? He asked.
I didn't bribe him. He wanted to help. He wanted me to beat you.
With the Honjo Masamune, Set laughed. Didn't that moron Joshua tell you the sword is corrupted?
For a brief moment, I was surprised. Then I realized that Set likely didn't know the sword had been made holy. He was in the dark. I could use that to my advantage. What do you mean it's corrupted? I snapped. If it's so corrupted, why even bother evading it? Set glared at me a moment, and then he beamed. A twisted and sadistic glare that made my blood run cold.
Very nice, Rebecca. I almost bought that. It's clear the sword has been restored. Foolish as he may be, Raines would not have sent you after me with a blade he knows is useless. He somehow restored it, but it doesn't matter. He sighed and gave a sarcastic yawn. The truth is that, even if it were brand new, that steel would never kill the likes of me.
Then why are we wasting time? I started, trying to egg him on. Come on and try me if you're so sure.
Because I want to have some fun first, dear. I want to fight you. If I wanted to kill you, I'd simply throw Gungnir at you and be done with it. I want to see you try. With a sword that can't slay me, guns that will do little more than sting, and the bow of Artemis that I can easily evade. So what will you do? What feeble flailing will you fling at the darkness before it consumes you?
I sneered and quickly reached behind me to grab my pistol. I yanked it out and unloaded the clip in a rapid-fire volley of bullets. Set didn't even dodge as each bullet found their mark and struck him in the chest, face, and shoulders. He sneered as his wounds began to close almost immediately. I couldn't afford to waste time. I yanked out Artemis's bow and notched air from the quiver on my back. Set laughed as I fired. The arrow whizzed through the night air, and as if snatching a thrown ball, he caught the arrow and snapped it in half.
Well, that didn't work. Come on. I liked it better when you were swinging that sword at me.
I grabbed another arrow and I began running towards him. I pulled back and exhaled as I released the arrow. As I did, I dropped the bow and grabbed the sword, speeding up. Set simply sighed and knocked the arrow aside.
A diversionary tactic. Better. But it seems you're still playing by the book. Why won't you try and surprise me?
Surprise, you bastard! I swung the sword fast as the steel flashed and struck his hip. Smet smiled as he watched it swing. But the instant the steel made connection, his smile vanished into a look of shock and agony. Ah! He jumped back, kicking me in the jaw and sending me sprawling backwards as he gasped at the gash in his side. It was burning and searing. It wouldn't close, and Set was sweating in pain and fury.
How did you...
I looked at my sword as even the blood was dripping off of it like the sword would not stand for it to tarnish the blade.
The Masamune can't do this. That's not the Masamune.
Suddenly his look of pain was met with a laugh of ecstasy. His bark-like laugh echoed across our little island, and I quivered in fear as this jackal-like man howled with his joy and elation.
Yes! 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 Excellent! This is perfect! This is so much better, Rebecca! Just the kind of twist to make the game more interesting. A holy sword. You didn't just purify that piece of steel. You consecrated it in the name of the divine. I don't know how you managed it, but you truly impressed me. I knew you would.
Why wasn't he afraid? I now knew that I was holding a weapon that could harm him, and he knew it too. He was aware that I was capable of fighting and killing him, and yet he was laughing. He was excited. A myriad of questions filled my head as I wrapped my mind around this revelation. Game. You really do think this is all some game?
Foolish girl. Have these last few weeks taught you nothing? We'll discuss it later, but for now let's play another round. I'm intrigued to see what you'll do.
This time he attacked. He moved with unbelievable speed. I again found myself thanking Hachiman for his training, for if he hadn't, I would have died then and there. I parried his thrust and came up under him to deliver a strike. He brought the spear around and swung it in a high arc, forcing me to duck as he brought the rear butt of the spear down as a hard striking point. I took the blow, but allowed myself to roll back into a guard position. Set pressed the attack and swept at my legs. I retreated 3 paces, but then rushed back forward with a downward execution strike. The blade would have cut through his head had he not turned just slightly to the left and brought the point of his spear down on my knee. I yelped and rolled aside.
Your reflexes are perfect!
You bastard! I winced, clutching the bleeding knee. He was toying with me at this point.
It felt like I was training with Hachiman again. He too would toy with me, walk circles around me as we sparred, but the difference was that when I made an error, he'd chastise me and tell me what I did wrong. He or Set praised my efforts. Was it weird to say I found his compliments far more insulting than Hachiman's reprimand? I got up and glared daggers at him, trying to think of what to do next. Before I could even piece together my next move, in the blink of an eye, he was in front of me. I yelped and swung up at his neck, but his spear met it with a twist and a kick. He knocked the sword clean from my hand and sent it flying across the ground, leaving it resting nearly 30 meters away. "Now fight for your life," he cried. He swung down with the spear, and I dove out of his way. He swung again, and I threw my arms up to block it. There was the sound of a loud crack, and my arms felt like they'd been snapped in half. I screamed as I was thrown backwards, and my arms instantly began to turn purple. He'd broken my arm with that swing. How could I defeat someone like this? How did I even stand a chance? He pursued me, and it took all I had to throw myself out of his attack range. I had to get to the sword again. I had no other option. I started to sprint for the sword. To my surprise, Set only laughed and stood still. "Desperate, are we? Maybe it's time I end this fight." He drew back his hand and raised his spear. Then with a grunt, he threw it at my back. The sound of thunder rolled overhead as the spear hurtled towards me. I knew it would hit. Gungnir could never miss its target. But suddenly, I got an idea. It was risky, but I had to try it. I swiftly took off the quiver from my back, knocked two of the arrows in the quiver to my bow, and without removing the quiver itself, I then fired wide. The quiver flew away. I had disarmed myself of all my arrows, but would my plan work? I threw myself to the ground just in time for the spear to turn sharply and strike my quiver through the center. Set spat in disapproval, and I dared to flash a smile. He'd been aiming at the quiver on my back, so the spear followed it. I took advantage of that small moment and threw myself at the sword. I took it up in my hand and sheathed it quickly, bringing it to my side, and I took an EI stance. Set walked to the spear and yanked it up again, turning to face me. He was still smiling, though. Despite everything, he never looked unnerved or frightened or scared. He said something to me, but I didn't listen. I was trying to tune him out. I didn't need to hear his voice now. I wanted to hear Hachiman. "Remember the 5 primal elements in swordsmanship. Make your stance strong like earth, movements flowing like water, speed matching lightning, blows ferocious as fire, and steps dancing like the wind. These 5 elements are essential. But also remember this. The katana is a beautiful and deadly sword. But most samurai who knew how to use it used to know how to use it to kill in one blow. The ability to strike and kill your opponent in one blow. Cutting down your enemy in 1 microsecond of time is how many swordsmen gain their fame." "That's cool, but how will that help me?" "Simple. You can't beat Set in swordplay. He's lived for thousands of years and has experience far surpassing yours. If it comes down to drawn-out fighting, you will lose. But if you can master Iaijutsu, you'll have a chance. No matter how skilled or experienced a warrior is, they always leave an opening. There is always a gap in their defenses. When you use a quick draw, you must ensure you strike at that opening with all your strength." "And how will I know the opening?" "It is the most simple and yet most difficult of skills to master. In a single word, you must close your eyes and feel it." I inhaled slowly. The air was musty and thick with moisture. I exhaled, allowing the pain in me to leave my flesh. I relaxed my hand over the sheath of the blade. My arm was pulsing with pain, but I ignored it. I inhaled. The scent of sweat on my brow was clear to me, and the sensational rumbling of the rocks beneath me was more audible, as was the rolling of the sea tide all around. I exhaled. I could feel my muscles trying to tighten. My upper body wanted to tense up and get defensive. I would not allow it. I remained calm. I inhaled. Longer and longer I took in the breath of air, and I could finally begin to sense the world around me in an almost 3D map. But no matter how long I breathed, no opening became clear to me. Set simply stood there, smirking at me. He was speaking, but I was ignoring him. He was taunting me, egging me on. "No, don't think. Just breathe. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale." With each breath, the vision of his stance and Set's posture became more obvious. I had to find his weakness before he made his first move. While I sheathed,
I was entirely defenseless. Plus, I remembered Hachiman explaining the weaknesses of this technique. When you strike, you must be sure that you struck your target, because if you miss, you'll be vulnerable for almost a full second before you can return to your defensive posture. I had to find that opening. But where the hell was it?
I think it's time our game comes to an end. You came very far, Rebecca, and I admit, I am truly proud of you for your achievements. So much in so little time. In time, you would have become a truly exceptional Night Angel. But now, I think...
Set looked up in surprise. A powerful, loud shriek filled the night. He looked in the direction of the island where the ritual had begun taking place. He had a concerned look on his face.
My beloved seems to have woken up. His concerned expression broke into a wide beam. At last, the new age shall begin.
As he spoke, I felt the soft, luminous touch of the full moon as the clouds parted again. Inhale. Exhale. There! I saw it. I saw it clear as the moon. I felt strength and confidence course through my blood as my soul howled to the glorious night. Again, I felt that gentle caress of an evening chill drive me forward as I darted at Set. The brief moment of distraction, that thin moment of arrogance, it had created the opening. I would seize it. I would take it. I would pounce upon it. I was a warrior. I was a wolf. I was a night angel. I gripped my sword tightly and unsheathed it, slicing across the air with all my might. As the steel sang to the night, the glistening moon made the blade flash midway out. I felt so little resistance that my heart sank. I'd missed. Surely I'd missed. Set stood stock still for a moment, his eyes wide in surprise, his mouth half open. And then he screamed. Ah! The sword had cut clean through his chest, leaving an enormous gash upon him that was already starting to burn. I couldn't stop. The fight wasn't done. I spun back and attacked. Set swung the spear, but I danced around it like a gentle breeze and struck at his leg with the blade. I left a long cut through his calf, which made him buckle. I swung the sword back and struck at his throat. He managed to dodge and swing out with the spear again, but the point barely grazed my ear before I brought the sword down, cleaving his arm from his body. Set roared in agony. I plunged the sword deep into his chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. Set lay there, armless, burning with white fire, his blood seeped from his mouth. I held the sword in his chest, a long moment as I struggled to catch my breath. Over. It's over. Set laughed painfully, but it was still that audacious and corrupted cackle of his I'd come to loathe.
Outstanding! What fun that was! It's been so long since I've lost. I had forgotten the pain.
How are you still laughing? I cried, desperate to understand. What are you so happy about?
That was fun, Rebecca Anderson. Wasn't that so much fun?
No, I shrieked. None of this was fun.
And yet, I see it in your eyes. In that moment, when you struck me down, I saw a spark in your eyes. A fire, a vigor. You can deny it all you want. But this life suits you, Night Angel. Very well done.
I cringed at his words, trying to deny any form of truth in them, though a small inkling in the back of my mind was finding them unnervingly plausible.
I told you from the start, it was all a game, Rebecca. And what a game it was.
You think ruining lives and threatening the world is a game?
It's life, my dear, Set answered. Like I told you, life is nothing more than a game. You are dealt a hand at birth, placed at a table with people and things you barely know or understand. The game starts and you barely know the rules, but you must learn them fast or be left in the dust. Survival is a game, and success is the reward for the winners. I dealt a new hand, and we both played our hands. And for the first time in a millennia, I lost. But what a magnificent, entertaining show.
You jackass! You ruined lives! You killed hundreds! You tried to resurrect a monster just to wreck reality! You think that's a game? It's entertaining to you?
Don't you find it entertaining? Set asked.
Of course I don't. No sane person would. Sanity. What a despicable state of mind. It's sanity that's ruined the world, Rebecca. It's rationality and logic that's destroyed humanity, not me. Do you really think that I am the source of humanity's destruction? Do you think the monsters of the night are what will end your race? No. It's this rationalized and boring world of yours. Boredom will breed disdain. Disdain will breed chaos. And chaos will breed destruction. Sanity is the end of all things.
As his body burned away, his eyes fell on me, those sickly red and yellow eyes that chilled my blood cold.
You'll see in time, child. You have so much left to learn, and the game hasn't ended for you yet. This is just your first hand. There are far worse things in this world than me, and it will take far more than a holy sword to stop it. If you want to protect this pitiful world, then you'd best take my advice, child.
His haunting eyes flashed and his body withered away before me, but his final words rung out in my mind and body.
Abandon sanity. Embrace the irrational. Rationality is but a thin veil meant to hide your true potential. Life without chaos and irrationality isn't really life at all.
As his face faded away into nothing more than a pile of ash, I swore I could hear his maniacal laughter once more telling me,
Game well played.
Chapter 37. It was over, or at least I felt like it was. I felt like the cold and wet wind blowing and the ashes of set finally began to fade into the dirt around me. There was a stillness in the very being as the sword in my hand slipped slightly, touching the ground with its tip. I gazed at the spot where Set once lay, and I felt the weight of victory come crashing upon my shoulders, sinking to the ground. I looked down at the blood splatter from both myself and Set. It was like I was standing in a dream. I could just scarcely believe it. But then my thoughts turned to Joshua. He was still dealing with the Echidna. I had to get to him and help. I tried to stand up, but almost instantly my legs gave out and I hit the ground. I let a cry of pain and frustration as I landed on my broken arm and struggled to my feet again. I could see Sleipnir, the gorgeous horse of Odin, standing not far off, as if inspecting me closely. I hobbled over to him and reached out. "Come on, boy. We gotta get back to Joshua." The horse gave a grunt but did not stop to aid me. Instead, it trotted around me, and the nudge of familiar golden shaft stuck in the dirt. The spear of Odin. Gungnir still stood there, reverently. It made sense. This was the reason Sleipnir had helped me at all. He was just retrieving his master's tool. "I'm sorry, Sleipnir, but you're my only way back. I have to help Joshua."
"And do you really think you'll make it far in your condition?"
I screamed as a loud sound of thunder cracked across the sky and reverberated through the air. It was as if a typhoon had awakened just around me. Heat and cold became interchangeable. In an instant, as feelings of indiscernible power warped and flew around me like hungry, ravenous birds. Yet it glowed softly like the flickering of a candle. I threw myself down and tried to cover my face, horrified and unsure of what to do, then to cower. I felt eyes looking down at me, but I dared not look up at them. What had arrived? Was it Echidna? Was it another threat? I gripped the sword in my tired and weary hand and boldly dared to raise my head once more. My breath caught in my throat. Before me stood a gathering of visages I never in my life imagined I'd gaze upon. Standing in front of me was a large olive-skinned man with a long white beard and hair adorned with a toga and lightning flaring across his eyes. He had a frustrated look about him and a sneer in his lips. His arms were crossed, and I could see great energy rolling off of his body. To his right hand was a woman with long hair and glorious eyes. Her visage was mature, and she had on a very curious gaze to her. Though she stood close to the man, she did not hold his arm, like she did not consider his presence especially pleasing. To my right stood a man with a muscular torso and tanned skin, with golden jewels on his arms and legs, and a naked chest and a red loincloth around his waist. And his head was that of a falcon. He, too, had a fierce look about him. He stood near the ashes of the fallen Set and was grimacing darkly at me. and still yet there were others of whom I did not recognize, some with blue skin and many arms. There was another with a face like an elephant. Just behind me, as I turned to look, was a beautiful woman with long black hair and a hair accessory. What made her unique was that she seemed to sit on a floating lotus blossom, and she was on one of the only few still smiling, compassionately at me. I realized without asking or considering that I was surrounded by the gods of almost every pantheon I could think of, and more. Shit, I whispered. Such crude language, one spoke, the woman in front of me.
Peace, Hera. I imagine she's quite overwhelmed. A ruler's gathering like this has not happened in generations. To happen now before a single mortal would shock anyone.
The beautiful woman behind me then spoke. Greetings, Rebecca Anderson. I am Kuan Yin. You stand before the gathering of rulers, the rulers of the different pantheons and deities. You know my name? I asked.
You doubt our omnipotence?
One sneered. Considering the way he stood, I imagined he was Zeus.
Such arrogance.
I know you're powerful, but Words caught in my throat as I fought to try to figure out what to say or think to these beings.
Nothing need be said,
Zeus growled, almost like he was reading my thoughts. He turned his attention to the falcon-headed man and sneered.
Is he dead, Ra?
Very much so, Ra answered, spitting. Can Falcon spit? On the ground. Detestable as he could be, Set was still one of my pantheon. His loss is regrettable. And the culprit is here, another god shouted. There was a murmur of agreement as the gods glared at me. I raised my sword defensively, and this time there was a new response. The sword seemed to flash, and I gazed as white flames seemed to echo around it. The flames leapt and seared across the blade, and the deity shrunk back from it. Just how strong was this sword? Now I understood why Joshua had hesitated to claim it. I was getting scared just holding it.
A mortal would dare draw a blade against us? Heretical! You defy the gods!
You're not God, I squeaked, far less confident than I wanted to be. I was told that you're just spirits and daemons. You're not the real God. There was a hush as the blade almost sang with holy fire. My words seemed to breathe new fear to the Pantheon leaders. Zeus took a step forward, daring to approach as he raised his hand.
For thousands of years, Zeus began, we, the many pantheons of this world, have made it our duty to guide, shelter, discipline mortals of the many nations and realms. Our peace is maintained by not quarreling with each other and by punishing those who would oppose us. While perhaps not the divine God, we are still your betters. And you have slain a deity of Egyptian pantheon, and now will suffer the consequences.
He was a monster, I finally shrieked. He was going to plunge the world into...
Be silent!
I shrank back as he raised his hand, and lightning began to envelop his outstretched fingers. The gods took many steps back to evade what would certainly be a death stroke.
Whatever your reasons, and whatever he may have done, issues of the pantheons are to be settled by their own pantheon. You shall be punished, Anderson.
He pulled back his hand to strike me down. The blow did not fall. Instead, there was a rushing wind, and I screamed as I was grabbed around the middle and pulled away. A figure broke through the crowd of gods and slammed his wrist into Zeus's arm, knocking the lightning bolt aside and into the seawater. Zeus let out a cry of rage, and the figure responded with a booming and hearty laugh. He stood with long, white hair and a magnificent beard. He wore a magnificent battle armor and a cape and a helmet with wings upon it. In his hand was the spear that Set had stolen, Gungnir. On his shoulder were a pair of ravens who were cawing loudly in excitement, and his right eye was missing from its socket.
Odin, you bastard, Zeus snarled. Good to see you too, man-whore of Greece, Odin laughed. I'd ask you to not be so hasty blowing your load on an innocent young girl, but I suppose that's just par for the course with you, isn't it?
This insult got a low chuckle from around the crowd, and Zeus's face flushed deep purple in anger and humiliation. I looked up to see the one who had pulled me away was a woman in armor and robes, with long, beautiful golden hair and a slight scar on her otherwise flawless features. She smiled down at me and winked. Fear not, dear sister. You will not die this day, not while Asgard is in your debt.
What right have you to interfere, King Odin? Ra asked angrily. Zeus speaks the truth. The girl has slain a god, and thus is to be put to death.
Aye, you're correct, Lord Falconface, Odin chuckled. The laws we crafted clearly state that one who kills a god shall receive judgment from the pantheon of whom he was slain. But I'm confused. Set was both Set of Egypt and Typhon of Greece. The world fell silent. So, which pantheon will claim ownership of the beast? The two leaders both gazed at each other in shock, not sure what to say.
I didn't seem to get it myself. Did it matter whose pantheon Set belonged to?
I suppose it could be either of us, Ra answered.
Oh, good, then you are both prepared for your own punishment.
A gasp was exclaimed by Hera and by a few other gods.
What do you mean, One-Eye? Zeus sneered. Only that Set was responsible for theft from multiple pantheons and the resurrection of an apocalyptic god. Meddling in the affairs of other pantheons is already a crime in of itself, but isn't the fraternizing of apocalyptic forces also against our agreed treaties? So, as Set is no longer alive to receive his punishment, his pantheon shall receive it for not better maintaining control of him.
As he spoke, Zeus was visibly sweating now, and Ra looked like he was choking on a hard object, as his mouth was held agape, and he would not speak a word.
So, whose neck shall I snap this day for letting my Aesir and all of Asgard suffer? He went by his Egyptian name, Set. He was of Ra's people.
Silence, Ra bellowed. He mated with your monster. He did his dirty work on your islands of Greece. The fault is yours, Zeus.
You dare accuse me, Ra? Me, Lord of Olympus?
Do not forget to whom you speak, you perverted old coot.
That will do, Guan Yin said calmly, appearing between the two and holding out her hands, never losing her composure or smile. She glanced to both Ra and Zeus, and then at Odin, who was watching with a sadistic grin. As this case clearly requires more information and insight, perhaps we should postpone the sentencing of the accused for a period.
I'll concede to that, Odin agreed. Or we could just punish you both. Getting rid of two decrepit old fools would suit me fine.
As the gods began to see the situation diffuse, the tension started to die down, and even the interest in the proceedings seemed to be ebbing away. The woman holding me did not let go, but kept an arm on my shoulder, as if to make sure I said and did nothing.
But what of the mortal? Ra shouted. She has still slain a deity. Is that to simply be ignored?
No, Odin replied sharply. But our agreement also states that a mortal who provides aid or assistance to a pantheon or its kin shall receive their blessing. This mortal has returned to me my spear and my horse, and as such, I provide her my blessing. Which is, Zeus asked, the protection and blessing of Asgard. Strike her, and you will suffer the wrath of the Aesir.
Zeus looked ready to explode with an outrageous temper. Ra pouted silently before backing off and looking disgusted. Odin glanced around to all the other gods in attendance and smiled in a way that it was in no way warm or inviting.
So, anyone wish to pass judgment on my acolyte?
Slowly the procession began to dissipate as gods of various pantheons and orders turned to leave and vanish from view. Zeus was fuming, and he pointed a finger at Odin.
Mark my words, Odin. This is not over. You dare insult me and our rules before the entire gathering? You will pay. I swear you will answer me for this. We will all answer for our actions one day, man-whore of Olympus, Odin chuckled. And what will yours be?
Without another answer, Zeus and Hera both disappeared in a flash of glorious lightning. Ra, too, walked away, disappearing in a flash of fire. Guan Yin and Odin and the woman holding me were the only ones who remained. Always one to make a spectacle, King of Asgard, she muttered. Your boisterousness is unbecoming, and yet it so suits you.
Do not preach to me, Guan Yin, Odin chuckled. Those who do not practice the arts of battle have honor cannot sway me. I value your wisdom, but in this I will handle the matter in my own way.
Guan Yin nodded and then bowed to me, suddenly reminding myself that I was indeed a player in this game, and not just a spectator. For what it is worth, little night angel, I commend your strength and fortitude. Before I could even return the bow, she vanished once more in a flash, and I was left standing at the feet of Odin and his woman friend.
Frigg, you may release her.
Frigg, Odin's wife, finally stood once more, and I fell, gasping for air and for peace, as if I'd been holding my breath through the entire ordeal. Odin walked towards me, and I was immediately aware of just how tall and powerful he was to me. Huge and immensely powerful in appearance. I felt like he could crush me if he wanted, but his smile was warm and filled with joy.
Little mortal. Rebecca Anderson, I thank you. Asgard thanks you. Your actions have rid us of not only Set, but returned our lost items to us. I apologize we were not here sooner. It took some time for Idun to return to us with her apples to restore our youth and power. But she quickly explained the goings-on of Set and your battle with him. We came swiftly, but were too late to aid you in the fight.
There was a great neigh, and Odin beamed as Sleipnir ran to him in excitement and compassion, nuzzling his master.
And it seems that my steed served you quite well.
I couldn't speak. I was too lost for words. I nearly fell over again, but forced myself to remain standing. As I gazed into his single eye, I felt the knowledge and patience behind it. You're welcome, sir.
Call me Odin, and this is my wife, Frigg.
We owe you much, young Valkyrie, Frigg smiled. Forgive me, I know your term is Night Angel, but to us Aesir you are more like a Valkyrie, a maiden of battle and great honor. Thank you, I don't know what to say.
Then take a moment to collect yourself, girl,
Odin explained. He extended his hand for me to take it, like a grandfather reaching out to hold his granddaughter's hand.
Walk with me. There is much to talk about.
Chapter 38. Walking side by side with a god. I never once in my life pictured such a thing. Certainly when my dad would give me a sermon about walking with God, I sometimes had the mental image of myself walking on a beach next to Jesus, but this wasn't Jesus. I was standing beside Odin on one side and Frigg on the other. Both were beaming brightly, and Sleipnir, Odin's horse, was simply trotting beside us. I coughed, unsure of what to say or do. I owed Odin my life. He saved me from the judgment of the Pantheons. For that matter, what even was that? As if sensing my confusion, Odin smiled and placed a strong hand on my shoulder.
You have questions, and this is good. Wisdom comes from asking. Unfortunately, I fear that it is not my place to answer everything you have to ask, but I will try to answer what I can. Ask me, and I shall do my best to explain in a manner that you will find suitable.
You mean it? It is the least we can do, Frigg explained. You have saved the Aesir and more. The world. Answering your questions is barely anything compared to the thanks you deserve. I smiled at her, and then at Odin as we walked the rocky island. I did have questions, so I started with the first thing that came to mind. Oh, what was that whole gathering thing that happened? Why did Zeus get so upset with you? Odin burst out laughing at the second question while Frigg shook her head. Many aeons ago, when we were nothing more than mere daemons, whispers upon the wind, humans began worshipping us, treating us as gods. And when you worship something and give it validity, eventually it takes on power of its own. Even something as insignificant as a stone, if worshipped, can become something more than a mere stone through the deification. As more and more of us gained power, we began to argue amongst ourselves. The culminated once in Egypt when the Egyptian pantheons were forced to contend with the one true God.
They never recovered from that beating. It taught us a lesson, though. We can't risk angering other deities and pantheons. So we formed what we call the Gathering of the Pantheons, an alliance of pantheons meant to work together for the betterment of man.
That sounds cool. I tried to look agreeable. Odin just scoffed.
It's a load of shite, he answered darkly.
The gathering never meets unless a great disaster happens in which a pantheon is responsible. Most only show up to witness judgment being carried out, because few rarely care about governing or keeping the peace. I think they only came to see a night angel get executed by Zeus, Frigg sighed. But why? I asked curiously. Odin and Frigg shared a look. That is something I'm afraid we can't explain.
The truth is, child, that night angels and deities like us don't have a very positive history, Odin replied. So I think there's some pent-up resentment.
The looks on their faces told me they knew more about that, but I also was feeling too scared to push harder. It was probably better that I move on to a new line of questioning. So you're not really gods. I was told that you were just, daemons.
Of course we're not gods, dear, Frigg replied.
We've never referred to ourselves as God. That was the choice of those who worshipped us, Odin shrugged. Don't really know why we'd want the title. Being God means that you hold the responsibility of the world and all of creation. The Aesir have never sought such arrogant ends as this. Leave shit like that to the Olympus and to its fools. They can call themselves gods while hiding on their mountain if they like. They'll answer to it in the end.
I smiled at this, somehow knowing that the pantheons weren't true arbiters of creation. It was good to know somehow that there was a god and it wasn't these. Yet there was still more that troubled me, and it was something I could perhaps now ask, now that she knew the immediate threat was gone, of course. Set said that there were more dangerous things out there than him, that greater forces were coming. I felt my voice tremble a little as I spoke. What did he mean? Odin frowned and stroked his impressive beard.
Honestly, I'm not sure myself, but I can assure you that Set hardly warrants the worst entity on this world. There are greater threats than him that lay dormant even today.
Odin, my love, we cannot speak of this, Frigg warned. Speak of what? I asked, now certain that they knew something I didn't. Odin opened his mouth as if to answer, but then closed it again.
No, Frigg is correct. I can't tell you all these things now. Forgive me.
He then stopped a moment and looked off to the sky, as if seeing something there that I couldn't.
Our time draws short, Rebecca. We must return to Asgard.
You have to go? So soon? I asked, disappointed. Odin and Frigg seemed so warm and friendly. A good change of pace, given the last several weeks. It will not be a long parting, I'm sure, but we've only recently begun to gain our power back. We can't afford to be gone from Asgard too long. Plus, with the great mother of monsters now being revived, it would seem that our duty now is called to defend mankind. I believe, though, that we will meet again someday.
But in the meantime, I feel that we still have not adequately thanked you for your service to us. So for the return of my horse, my spear, and our dear Idun and her apples, I will give you 3 gifts of equal measure. Does this please you?
Wait, gifts? What kind?
Well, firstly,
Odin looked to his shoulder with his one good eye, where a large raven sat patiently.
This is Munin, one of my ravens, and I offer you his services.
The raven let out a croaking cry and then flew from his master's shoulder, circling me excitedly. I watched a moment, and then the realization of this gift dawned on me. You're giving me a bird?
My ravens are no ordinary birds, Rebecca, he laughed. Every morning I would send these 2 birds out to circle the world, and by dinner they would return to me to tell me the news of what has been happening. They are intelligent, they can speak the human tongue, and are faster than any bird on earth. Munin is reliable and will serve you well. As I fear that Echidna will likely escape and begin breeding again, you will need reliable information quickly to know when and where to intercept her actions. Munin can do just that for you.
Hearing this aroused my skepticism, but as the raven landed on my shoulder, I felt its beak close to my ear. I started to recoil from the strange sensation when suddenly I heard its voice. Trust me, it whispered. My master speaks truth, and I will obey you as I do him. I don't have bird feed, I said. Mooning cawed happily and flapped his wings. I find my own meals, young mistress, it answered. I giggled and looked to Odin. Will you be fine loaning him to me?
If I need of Munin again, I'll call him. But I believe that Hugin, his brother, will still perform well enough for my needs. But that is only one of the gifts I offer. Allow me to present you with another.
He looked at Frigg, who stepped close and extended a small ivory object. It was like a goat's horn, but the inside was hollowed out, and there was Slavic script etched around the center of it. I took it in my hand and held it gently, frightened I might break it. Well, what is it? I asked. A horn of the Valkyrie, Frigg answered. They answer to its call. Should you be in great danger or in need of salvation, blow into the horn with all your might, and a Valkyrie will ride to your aid. Are you serious? A part of me wanted to blow into the horn immediately and see a Valkyrie ride from the sky on a white horse, but I thought better of it. They are not to be taken lightly. Valkyrie are maidens of battle and will only come if the need is truly great. Do not call them for trivial concerns, although I doubt you would waste or abuse the horn like others might. In the coming years, I have no doubt Echidna will breed strange monsters with seemingly no weaknesses or hindrances. In times like these, it might be necessary to have that aid.
This is a tool for only dire situations. I implore you to remember that. I immediately tied the horn to my belt and nodded. Yes, ma'am.
These are the 2 gifts we set aside for you, Rebecca. But is there a third request you have? What would you ask of it? Name it, and we shall try to procure it for you, Odin offered.
The offer was tremendous, and my mind raced with ideas of what to ask for. But then I remembered. I remembered what Artemis had told me in the forest. I inhaled slowly and raised my eyes to Odin. I know it's a lot to ask, but when Artemis gave me her bow to use, she told me my mom had spoken to your uncle, the giant Mimir. Odin blinked twice and then looked at Frigg in surprise.
Mimir, he asked. He knew your mother.
I was wondering, I want to know more about my mom. Could I talk to Mimir? I want to hear about her from him. Odin frowned and sighed deeply.
That won't be easy, he answered. Mimir's head was severed from his body many thousands of years ago.
He's dead? But then, how could my mom...
Oh, he's still alive. I preserved his head in the Well of Wisdom beneath Yggdrasil. I don't know how your mother reached him, but that's the only place you could go to speak to him, Odin answered.
The Well of... Wait, he's still alive? It's just a head? I was hardly able to wrap my mind around the concept, but then again, I was talking to Odin and Frigg themselves. Was anything that insane at this point? Can I go see him, please? That is not possible at this time, Frigg remarked. There are preparations to be made before a mortal can travel to the Well of Wisdom. Well, what can I do? How do I get prepared, I guess? I mean, what do I do? How do I go there? Odin shook his head.
We'll concern ourselves with that later. For now, rest assured that we will begin making those preparations, and will contact you when the time is right. Under normal circumstances, a mortal is not allowed near the Well of Wisdom. But you seem trustworthy. I think we can make an exception for you.
I felt a swelling of joy in my soul at the sound of this. Odin trusted me. Was it odd to say that I felt a little proud of that? Before I could say anything more, there was a loud horn-like noise coming from the horizon. The sun was starting to rise, and Odin sighed.
It seems Asgard calls us home.
We must return now, Frigg explained. We will return when the time is right. Odin climbed atop Sleipnir with Frigg behind him. He then bowed respectfully.
Until our paths cross once more, Valkyrie of the Night, farewell.
And with the roar of Sleipnir and the stamping of hooves, they were gone. The only evidence of their ever visiting me was the raven upon my shoulder and the horn strapped to my side. And that, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, is all. We have read everything that I have written so far in The Night Angel. So, I will say this. The reason it stopped, because some of you are probably wondering, wait, doesn't it have more? Yes, I intended to write at least 1 or 2 more chapters, but I couldn't decide how best I wanted to end it. I really couldn't. So, since I had no plans to publish it right away, I left it alone, and then that's when my YouTube career took off, and, well, I haven't come back to it since. I do need to finish it. At some point I need to. But I thought about it, and I said, this is a very, very, very early story of mine. I'm not sure I want to really finish it until I've fixed it. So, what I will probably do is in the future, I will go back, edit it, fix it up, make some changes to it, and then go from there. And then maybe I'll give it a final wrap-up, and then we'll be done with The Night Angel for good. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope that it was an enjoyable thing for you. I'll release a poll or a post sometime tonight on YouTube. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Rebecca Anderson. I'd love to hear your thoughts on The Night Angel, what you thought about it, what you liked, what you didn't like. I'd love your thoughts on it. I really would love to hear your opinion because, like I said, this was a very old story. I think it's the 3rd or 4th book I ever wrote, and it is the first story I ever wrote with a female protagonist. It's definitely got some flaws. It's got some problems, I know, but it's one that I greatly, greatly love. Rebecca has been featured in a few short stories that I wrote for friends. I used her in a short story for Hannah, a short story for Jay. She's appeared in other stories and in other artworks, so she is definitely not a dead character. She's one that I still love. And so that's about it. So I guess that's all we have time for. I will start thinking on what book we read next.
we'll see. We'll see. Well, thank you all so much. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.